My parents fired me to hand our multi-million-dollar company to my incompetent sister, Sophia. 5 years later, they're bankrupt and begging for a bailout. They don't know I own the bank holding their debt, and I'm about to call the loan. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The migraine had been threatening to split my skull open since Tuesday, and by Friday evening, it had finally succeeded. I was lying on the cold tile of my bathroom floor, the only place in my penthouse that felt cool enough to stop the world from spinning. The lights were off. The curtains were drawn. My phone was silenced, face down on the marble vanity, vibrating angrily every 10 minutes. I hadn't eaten in 24 hours. My body was staging a revolt against the 80-hour work weeks I'd pulled to close the acquisition of a failing logistics firm in Chicago. I was vulnerable, weak, and barely conscious of my own surroundings. I just wanted the silence to swallow me whole. But the vibrating wouldn't stop. It was a persistent, rhythmic buzzing that drilled into my temples. Finally, I reached up, my hand trembling, and grabbed the device. I squinted through the pane at the screen. The name flashing there was one I hadn't seen in 3 years. Raylan, my mother. I stared at it, the white letters blurring against the black background. Why now? Why, after 3 years of absolute radio silence, was she calling me at 9:00 p.m. on a Friday? My thumb hovered over the decline button. I should have pressed it. I should have thrown the phone into the bathtub and gone back to sleep. But curiosity, that dangerous, masochistic impulse, took over. I swiped right and brought the phone to my ear, not saying a word. Emery. Her voice was shrill, frantic. It wasn't the voice of the composed, icy matriarch I remembered. It was the voice of a woman standing on the edge of a cliff. Emery, are you there? Pick up, damn it. I'm here, I croaked, my voice raspy from disuse. What do you want, Raylan? I didn't call her mom. I hadn't since the day she told me I was too abrasive to represent the family name. Oh, thank God, she let out a breath that sounded like a sob. We need you to come home, immediately, tonight. I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead against the cool porcelain of the bathtub. I'm not coming anywhere. I'm sick, and I have no home to come back to. You made sure of that. Stop it, she snapped, her old sharpness returning for a split second before fear washed it away. This isn't about your little grudges, Emery. It's the business. It's Sophia. She's done something. The auditors are here, Emery. They're talking about forensic accounting. They're talking about prison. My eyes snapped open in the dark. The pain in my head didn't vanish, but it was suddenly eclipsed by a cold, sharp clarity. Prison, I repeated, sitting up slowly. Andrew is hyperventilating in the study, Raylan continued, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. Sophia is locked in her room, refusing to speak to the lawyers. We need you to fix it. You're the only one who knows how the books used to be set up. You have to come. I don't have to do anything, I said, my voice gaining strength. We will pay you, she begged. The desperation in her voice was pathetic, a stark contrast to the arrogance she had wielded like a weapon for so long. Whatever you want, just, please, don't let them take the company. Don't let them take your sister. I sat there in the dark, the silence of my luxury apartment wrapping around me. They wanted me to save the golden child. They wanted the scapegoat to come back and clean up the mess, just like I had done 1,000 times when we were children. But they didn't know who they were talking to anymore. They thought they were calling Emery, the daughter who sought their approval. They didn't realize they were speaking to Emery, the managing partner of Obsidian Capital. I'll be there in an hour, I said quietly. Thank you, oh, thank God, Raylan wept. Don't thank me yet, I whispered to the empty room as I hung up. The betrayal they had served me 3 years ago was worse than the diagnosis of a terminal illness. It was the deliberate amputation of my soul. And now, they were asking the surgeon to come back, not to heal them, but to sew the limb back on. I didn't rush. Despite the urgency in Raylan's voice, I took a long, blistering hot shower. I washed the sickness and the sweat from my hair. I applied my makeup with surgical precision, hiding the dark circles under my eyes and the pallor of my skin. I dressed not in the comfortable clothes of a concerned daughter, but in my armor. a tailored charcoal suit, silk blouse, and 4-inch heels that clicked on the floor like the ticking of a countdown clock. Driving to the estate, the sprawling, gated compound my grandfather had built and my parents currently occupied, felt like driving into a past life. My stomach churned, not just from the lingering migraine, but from the toxic nostalgia of the place. When I pulled up to the main gate, it was open. The lights in the main house were blazing. I parked my matte black sedan next to Sophia's cherry red convertible. I noted the scratch on the bumper and the way it was parked crookedly across 2 spaces. Typical. The front door opened before I even reached the steps. It wasn't a servant. They had likely been let go weeks ago if things were as bad as Raylan claimed. It was Andrew, my father. He looked 10 years older than the last time I had seen him. His hair was entirely white, thinning rapidly, and his usually impeccable posture was slumped. He smelled faintly of scotch. "Emery," he breathed, reaching out as if to hug me. I sidestepped him smoothly, walking past him into the foyer. "Andrew, where is she?" He blinked, his arms falling to his sides. "In the living room, with your mother." I walked into the grand living room, the space where we used to open Christmas presents, the space where I was told I was no longer part of the family company. Raylan was pacing in front of the fireplace, clutching a glass of wine. Sophia was sprawled on the vintage velvet sofa, scrolling on her phone, looking for all the world like a bored teenager rather than a CEO facing indictment. Sophia looked up as I entered. She hadn't aged a day, her skin perfect, her hair a cascade of expensive extensions, but her eyes were hard, glassy. "Well, look who it is," Sophia drawled, not sitting up. "The prodigal workaholic returns. Did you come to lecture me, Em?" "Sophia, shut up," Raylan snapped, turning to me. Her eyes scanned my outfit, my jewelry, likely calculating the cost. "Emery, you look expensive." "I am," I said, placing my briefcase on the coffee table. I didn't sit. I stood over them, looking down. "You said auditors. You said forensic accounting. Explain, now." Raylan looked at Andrew, who had shuffled into the room and collapsed into an armchair. "It's a misunderstanding," Andrew mumbled. "Just a cash flow issue. We moved some funds around to cover the expansion into the lifestyle brand." "The lifestyle brand that failed 6 months ago," I interrupted. "The one where Sophia spent $2 million on a launch party for a product that didn't exist." Sophia shot up, her face flushing red. "It was building brand awareness. You wouldn't understand, you're just a number cruncher. You have no vision." "I understand that brand awareness doesn't pay vendors," I said calmly. "Who is threatening legal action?" "The bank," Raylan whispered. "And the supplier union, they say the pension fund is empty, Emery." The room went dead silent. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly. "The pension fund," I repeated, my voice devoid of emotion. "Grandfather's protected fund for the machinists." "I needed liquidity," Sophia shouted, throwing her hands up. "It was a loan. I was going to put it back as soon as the influencers started posting the new line." I looked at them. My father, the coward. My mother, the enabler. My sister, the thief. They were looking at me with a mixture of resentment and hope. They thought I was here to write a check. They thought I was here to use my boring skills to balance the books so Sophia could go back to playing business tycoon. I felt a cold smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. "Show me the letters from the bank," I said. Andrew fumbled with a stack of papers on the side table and handed them to me. I scanned the letterhead. Apex Commercial Holdings. I almost laughed. I held the paper up to the light, pretending to read the terms I had personally drafted 3 months ago. "This looks serious," I said, my tone grave. "They're calling the entire note due in 30 days. If you don't pay, they seize the assets. The factory, the brand, this house." "We know," Raylan cried. "That's why you're here. You have money, Emery. We know you do. We saw the article in Forbes. You can loan us the $5 million. We'll pay you back with interest once Sophia gets the next quarter sorted." "Once Sophia gets the next quarter sorted," I echoed. "Is that the plan?" "She's learned her lesson," Andrew said quickly. "She just needs a fresh start." I looked at Sophia. She was smirking slightly, victory already in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought the family bond was a magic eraser for her crimes. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They didn't know who was sitting on the board of Apex Commercial Holdings. They didn't know that the shark they were terrified of was standing right in their living room. To understand why I didn't simply write the check and save my family from ruin, you have to understand the dinner that happened 3 years ago. I had been the VP of operations at our family company, Sterling Interiors. I had started on the factory floor at 16, sweeping sawdust. I had earned my MBA at night while working 60-hour weeks managing the supply chain. I knew every bolt, every vendor, every margin. Under my operational watch, profits had doubled. Sophia, on the other hand, had spent her 20s finding herself in Paris, Milan, and New York, usually on the company credit card. She had returned home with a vision to pivot our legacy cabinetry business into a modern lifestyle empire. I fought it. I showed Andrew the data. I showed Raylan the market research that proved our core demographic wanted quality, not influencers. Then came the dinner. It was my 35th birthday, or so I thought. I arrived at this very house, expecting a celebration. Instead, I found a lawyer present. Emery, Raylan had said, not even offering me a slice of cake. We feel that your energy is counterproductive to the new direction of Sterling Interiors. We're making Sophia CEO, Andrew had mumbled, unable to look me in the eye. She has the charisma, the youth. You're too rigid, Emery. You make the staff nervous with your spreadsheets and your rules. We're buying you out, Sophia had beamed, sliding a check across the table. It was a pittance, a fraction of what my shares were worth. It's better this way. Now you can go find a job that suits your personality, something in a basement maybe. They forced me out. They threatened to dilute my shares to zero if I didn't sign. So I took the check. I took my rigid skills and I left. I didn't speak to them again. I took that check and invested it in a failing tech startup that I turned around and sold for 20 times the value. Then I did it again. And again. Now, looking at Sophia in the present day, the memory burned like acid. She stood up and walked over to the minibar, pouring herself a drink. "Look, Em," she said, her voice dripping with that faux sweetness she used to manipulate our parents. "I know you're probably sore about how things ended. But let's be real, you were never a leader, you're a worker bee, I'm the queen bee, that's just biology." She took a sip, gesturing to the room with her glass. "I had a bad year, the market shifted, it's not my fault. But Daddy says you're good at cleaning up messes, so be a good big sister and clean this up. I have a gala to plan for next month, and I can't have these auditors breathing down my neck." She wasn't asking for help, she was demanding service. "You stole from the pension fund, Sophia," I said, my voice low. "That's not a bad year, that's a felony." "It was a loan," she shrieked, her composure cracking. "I am the company, it's my money." "It's not your money," I said. "It belongs to the men and women who built this house you're standing in." "Oh, spare me the socialist speech," Raylan interjected, waving her hand dismissively. "The point is, we need $5 million. Can you provide it or not? If not, why are you even here?" The sheer entitlement was breathtaking. Raylan was looking at me like I was a malfunctioning appliance. Why wasn't I dispensing cash? Why wasn't I fixing the problem? I looked at the antagonist of my life, not just Sophia, but the three-headed monster of their collective ego. Sophia, the narcissist. Raylan, the architect of my pain. Andrew, the silent partner in my abuse. Sophia walked up to me, invading my personal space. She smelled of expensive perfume and gin. "You'll do it," she whispered, a cruel glint in her eyes. "Because you're desperate for Mom and Dad to love you again. You'd burn down the world just to have Sunday dinner with us. We know you, Emery. You're pathetic." She tapped my cheek, a condescending, stinging pat. That touch was the seal on their fate. "You're right, Sophia," I said, stepping back and smoothing my jacket. "I am desperate to resolve this." I turned to Andrew. "I can't give you the money tonight. It's tied up in assets, but I know a way to stall the bank. I know a way to restructure the debt so you don't lose the house." Andrew's face lit up with pathetic hope. "You do?" "Yes," I lied. But I need full access. I need the passwords to the accounts, the keys to the office, and I need you to sign a temporary power of attorney giving me authority to negotiate with the creditors. If you do that, I can save the company." "Do it," Raylan said immediately. "Whatever it takes." "I don't know." Sophia narrowed her eyes. "Does this mean she's in charge of me?" "It means I save your ass from jail, Sophia," I said sharply. Sophia huffed, rolling her eyes. "Fine, whatever. Just fix it so I can go to the Hamptons next week." They signed the papers right there on the coffee table. They handed me the keys to the kingdom they had stolen from me. They thought I was their savior. They had no idea I was the executioner. The moment I stepped out of the suffocating opulence of my parents' estate, I didn't feel relief. I felt a cold, sharp purpose, like a scalpel being unwrapped. I sat in my car for a moment, the signed power of attorney resting on the passenger seat. They thought it was a lifeline. In reality, it was a confession. I didn't go home. I drove straight to the glass-walled headquarters of Obsidian Capital. It was 11:30 p.m. on a Friday, but my keycard granted me access to the silent, humming heart of my operation. My team wasn't there. I didn't need them yet. I needed solitude to dissect the corpse of Sterling Interiors. I logged into the company's server using the credentials Andrew had scribbled on a napkin. The interface was outdated, clunky, a perfect metaphor for how they were running things. But the numbers told a story of pure devastation. I spent the next 6 hours poring over the financials. It was worse than Raylan had let on. It wasn't just a bad quarter. It was a systematic looting. Sophia had been treating the company accounts like her personal ATM. There were consulting fees paid to shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands, companies with directors whose names I recognized as her vacuous friends from art school. There were marketing expenses that suspiciously matched the cost of a luxury villa rental in Chelum. And then, the darkest stain of all, the pension fund. I pulled up the ledger for the employee retirement accounts. It should have held over $8 million, a nest egg built over 40 years by my grandfather for the machinists and craftsmen who made the company what it was. It was almost empty. The balance read $452,000. I stared at the screen, a knot of fury tightening in my chest. These weren't just numbers. These were people. People like Mr. Henderson, the floor manager who had taught me how to read a blueprint when I was 12. People like Sarah, the receptionist who had knit me a scarf when I went off to college. Sophia had stolen their futures to fund her delusions of grandeur. I needed more than just spreadsheets. I needed undeniable proof of intent. I needed to know exactly where the money had gone and if it could be recovered. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I rarely used. It was 3:00 a.m., but he picked up on the second ring. "Emery," a gravelly voice answered. "It's late or early, you okay?" "I need a favor, Marcus," I said, my voice steady. Marcus was a forensic accountant I had worked with on a hostile takeover 2 years ago. He was the best in the business at tracing digital breadcrumbs. "I'm sending you a data dump. I need you to find every penny that left Sterling Interiors in the last 18 months and tell me exactly whose pocket it landed in." "Is this personal?" Marcus asked, hearing the edge in my tone. "It's family," I said, "and it's criminal." "I'm on it," he replied. "Give me 24 hours. I hung up and leaned back in my chair, watching the sun begin to bleed into the sky over the city skyline. I had the leverage. I had the access. Now I needed to set the stage. I drafted an email to the board of directors of Sterling Interiors. Most of them were old friends of my father, cronies who had rubber-stamped Sophia's appointment. They were complicit in their negligence. I called for an emergency board meeting on Monday morning. The subject line, urgent restructuring proposal and solvency plan. They would expect a bailout. They would expect me to come in with a checkbook and a humble plea for them to keep their seats. Instead, I was bringing a guillotine. Monday morning arrived with a gray, drizzling sky that matched the mood in the Sterling Interiors boardroom. The room smelled of stale coffee and nervous sweat. My parents were there, looking hopeful and slightly smug. Sophia was there, dressed in a white designer suit that probably cost more than a machinist made in 3 months. She was scrolling on her phone, seemingly bored, but her foot was tapping a frantic rhythm under the table. The 5 board members, men in their 60s who had known me since I was a child, were murmuring amongst themselves. I walked in precisely at 9:00 a.m. I didn't greet anyone. I walked to the head of the table, where my father usually sat, and placed my briefcase down with a heavy thud. "Good morning," I said, my voice projecting clearly without shouting. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." "Emery, honey," my mother started, a strained smile on her face. "Why don't you sit over here? Your father usually—" "My father isn't running this meeting," I interrupted, not looking at her. "I am, as the appointed restructuring officer and as the representative of your primary creditor." A murmur of confusion went around the table. "Creditor," one board member asked. "We thought you were here to invest." "I am here to address the solvency of this company," I said, connecting my laptop to the projector, "and to address the leadership failure that brought us here." I clicked a button. The screen behind me lit up with a graph. It showed a steep, terrifying red line plunging downwards. "This is Sterling Interior's cash flow over the last 3 years," I explained, "since the change in leadership." Sophia scoffed loudly. "Oh, here we go, the lecture. Can we skip to the part where you give us the loan?" "There is no loan," I said, turning to look directly at her. The room went silent. "What?" Andrew whispered, his face draining of color. "But the house, the factory." "The company is insolvent," I continued, clicking to the next slide. It was a list of transactions. "And the reason isn't the market. It isn't the economy. It's embezzlement." The word hung in the air like a gunshot. "Excuse me." Sophia stood up, her face turning a blotchy red. "How dare you? I have worked my ass off for this company." "Sit down, Sophia," I commanded. My voice wasn't loud, but it had a steel core that made her hesitate. "These are transfers from the corporate operating account to Lux Ventures Limited, a shell company registered in your name in the Cayman Islands. Total value, $2.4 million. I clicked again. "These are payments for consulting to a firm owned by your boyfriend, Julian. Total value, $1.8 million. "That's a lie," Sophia screamed. "Those were legitimate expenses. Julian is a branding expert." "Julian is a DJ," I deadpanned. "And I have the invoices. They're for creative ideation. At $10,000 an hour." The board members were looking at each other, panic setting in. They realized they had been asleep at the wheel while the ship was being looted. "And finally," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "the pension fund." I clicked to the final slide. It showed the empty balance. "You stole their retirement, Sophia," I said. "To pay for your villa in St. Bart's, to pay for your, what is this? A spiritual retreat in Bali." "It was a loan." She shrieked, tears streaming down her face now. I was going to put it back. "You're twisting everything. Mom, Dad, make her stop. She's jealous. She's always been jealous of me." She turned to Raylan, expecting the usual defense. "Tell her. Tell her I'm the visionary. I'm the one with the talent." Raylan looked from the screen to Sophia, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. The undeniable proof was staring her in the face. The numbers didn't lie. "Sophia," Andrew stammered, Is this true, the pension fund?" "It doesn't matter," Sophia yelled, slamming her hand on the table. "Emery is just doing this to humiliate me. She wants to ruin us. She's the enemy here, not me." "I am not the enemy," I said calmly. "I am the only thing standing between you and a federal indictment." "You're lying," Sophia spat. "You don't have the power to do anything. You're just a bitter, lonely spinster who can't stand that I'm happy." It was a weak, pathetic insult. It was the lashing out of a cornered animal. And it confirmed everything the board needed to know. She wasn't a CEO. She was a child. The meeting ended in chaos. Sophia stormed out, screaming that she would sue me. My parents sat in stunned silence, unable to comprehend that their golden child was a criminal. The board members were terrified, asking me if they were liable. "I need full cooperation," I told the board. If you want to avoid being named in the lawsuit from the creditors, you will authorize a forensic audit immediately. They agreed instantly. They were desperate to save their own skins. Over the next week, the investigation deepened. Marcus, my forensic accountant, found more. It wasn't just the money. Sophia had been selling off company assets, machinery, vehicles, even the patent for our signature hinge mechanism, to competitors for pennies on the dollar to fuel her spending. She was cannibalizing the company from the inside out, but the most damning piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. I was in my temporary office at the factory, the old office that used to be mine, when there was a knock on the door. It was Mr. Henderson, the floor manager. He looked tired, his hands stained with grease, holding a crumpled cap. "Miss Emery," he said quietly, "is it true about the pension?" I looked at him, feeling a lump in my throat. I couldn't lie to him. "It's true, Mr. Henderson. The fund is depleted." He nodded slowly, looking down at his boots. "I see. I was supposed to retire next month. My wife, she needs surgery." "I know," I said softly. "There's something you should see," he said, pulling a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "Miss Sophia. She came down to the floor a few months back. She had us sign these papers, said it was for a new insurance policy, said it would double our benefits." I took the paper. It wasn't an insurance policy. It was a waiver releasing the company from liability for the pension fund in exchange for a one-time bonus of $500. She had tricked them. She had knowingly defrauded 50 loyal employees to cover her tracks. "Did everyone sign this?" I asked, my blood boiling. "Most of us," he said. "We trusted her because she's your sister, because she's Mr. Andrews' daughter." "Leave this with me, Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "I promise you, I will fix this." I now had proof of fraud, malicious, predatory fraud. Meanwhile, Sophia was trying to rally. She posted a video on social media, crying, claiming she was being bullied by corporate sharks. She didn't name me, but the implication was clear. She was playing the victim to her thousands of followers, trying to spin the narrative. Raylan called me that night. "Emery, please," she begged. "You have to stop this investigation. You're destroying the family name. Sophia she's fragile. She didn't mean to hurt anyone. Can't we just sell the summer house, pay it back quietly?" "The summer house is mortgaged to the hilt, Raylan," I said. "Sophia spent that money too." "But she's your sister," Raylan cried. "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "It means I know exactly who she is," I replied, "and I know she hasn't learned a damn thing." "If you go through with this," Raylan threatened, her voice turning cold, "we will never forgive you. You will be dead to us. Again." "I was already dead to you," I said. "You killed me 3 years ago when you chose a thief over a daughter." I hung up. The next day, I called a town hall meeting at the factory. I invited the entire staff. I invited the board. And I invited my family. I had the waivers. I had the bank records. And I had one final card to play. I had reached out to the primary creditor, Apex Commercial Holdings, and formally acquired the debt myself. I didn't just represent the bank anymore. I was the bank. The stage was set for the final act. I wasn't just going to expose Sophia. I was going to dismantle the entire illusion my parents had built their lives around. The factory floor was transformed. The machinery had been pushed back, and rows of folding chairs were set up facing a makeshift stage. The air was thick with the scent of sawdust and nervous anticipation. Every employee was there, over 100 men and women in their blue coveralls, their faces etched with worry. In the front row sat the board members, looking pale and uncomfortable, and next to them, my family. Raylan was dressed in black, as if attending a funeral, her face a mask of haughty displeasure. Andrew looked frail, his hands shaking slightly in his lap. Sophia was scrolling on her phone, refusing to look at anyone, a defiant smirk playing on her lips. She had posted another tearful video that morning, garnering sympathy from strangers who knew nothing of the lives she had ruined. I walked onto the stage, the heels of my boots clicking echoing in the silence. I carried only a single folder. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice amplified by the microphone but unwavering. "I know there have been rumors. I know there is fear. Today, we put an end to both. I looked directly at Sophia. She finally looked up, her eyes narrowing. 3 years ago, I continued, this company was profitable. It was stable. It was a family. Then leadership changed. Oh, here we go, Sophia heckled from the front row. The martyr speech. Get over yourself, Emery. Quiet, a machinist shouted from the back. Let her speak. Sophia scoffed, rolling her eyes. Since that change, I said, opening the folder, over $4 million has been drained from the company accounts. Not for equipment, not for wages, but for personal luxury. I held up a stack of papers. These are credit card statements, 5-star hotels, private jets, designer clothing, all charged to Sterling Interiors. Lies, Raylan stood up, her voice shrill. Those were business expenses. Networking, you don't understand how modern business works. Is a $50,000 birthday party for a cat a business expense? I asked, pulling out an invoice. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. And this, I said, holding up the waivers Mr. Henderson had given me. This is where it ends. These documents, they were a trick. A deliberate attempt to defraud the very people who built this company of their hard-earned pensions. That's slander, Sophia shrieked, jumping to her feet. I was protecting the company. I was restructuring the benefits. You were stealing, I said, my voice cutting through her excuses like a knife. You emptied the pension fund, Sophia, $8 million. The crowd erupted. Shouts of anger, disbelief, and betrayal filled the cavernous space. It was a loan. Sophia screamed, her face contorted with rage. I was going to put it back. As soon as the new line launched, you're just jealous. You've always been jealous because Mom and Dad love me more. She turned to the crowd, her arms wide. She's doing this to hurt me. She's the villain. She's trying to steal the company. I don't need to steal it, I said, my voice calm but amplified to boom over the noise. I already own it. The room went dead silent. Even Sophia froze. What? Andrew whispered. I bought the debt, I announced. Every cent Sterling Interiors owes to the bank is now owed to me, to Obsidian Capital. Raylan gasped, clutching her pearls. You bought the debt. Which means, I continued, that as of this morning I have exercised my right as the primary creditor to seize all assets used as collateral. The factory, the brand, the inventory, and, I paused, looking directly at my parents, the house. No, Raylan breathed. You can't, that's our home. It was collateral for the loan Sophia took out last year, I said. You signed the papers, Raylan. You co-signed. But we're family, she wailed. Family doesn't steal from family, I said cold. Family doesn't trick old men out of their retirement to buy handbags. I turned back to the employees. However, I am not here to liquidate, I am here to rebuild. Effective immediately, Sophia is removed as CEO, the board is dissolved, and I am reinstating the pension fund, fully funded from my own personal capital. A gasp went through the room, followed by a tentative applause that quickly grew into a roar. People were standing, cheering, some openly weeping. As for the management, I said, raising a hand to quiet them. I will be taking over as interim CEO until a suitable replacement is found. And that replacement will be chosen by a committee of employees, not by nepotism. I looked down at Sophia. She was trembling, her face pale. The reality was finally sinking in. She had lost everything. You can't do this, she hissed. I'll sue you. I'll tell everyone what a monster you are. Go ahead, I said. But first, you might want to talk to the two gentlemen waiting by the exit. I pointed to the back of the room. 2 uniformed police officers were standing there, their faces grim. For fraud, I said, and embezzlement. Mr. Henderson gave a sworn statement this morning. Sophia looked at the officers, then back at me, her eyes wide with terror. She looked at Raylan, who was sobbing into her hands. She looked at Andrew, who was staring at the floor, defeated. For the first time in her life, the golden child had nowhere to hide. Sophia was arrested right there on the factory floor. The video of her being led away in handcuffs went viral, but not in the way she had hoped. The comments were scathing. Entitled brat gets what she deserves. Finally, justice. Her influencer friends abandoned her instantly. My parents were evicted from the estate. It was a cold, hard process, but necessary. The house was sold to pay off the remaining creditors and to bolster the company's operating capital. Raylan and Andrew moved into a modest 2-bedroom condo in a nearby suburb, one that I paid for, anonymously, through a trust. It was more than they deserved, but I wasn't cruel. I just wanted them to understand consequences. I spent the next 6 months at Sterling Interiors, working harder than I ever had. We retooled the factory, brought back the quality standards that had made us famous, and slowly, painfully rebuilt trust with our vendors and customers. The pension fund was restored. Every dollar was accounted for. Mr. Henderson retired with his full benefits, and his wife got her surgery. The look on his face when I handed him the first check was worth more than any bonus I had ever earned on Wall Street. Sophia took a plea deal. 5 years in minimum security, followed by probation and restitution. She would be paying back the money she stole for the rest of her life. I visited her once, about 3 months into her sentence. She looked different. The extensions were gone, her roots were showing, and she wore a plain gray uniform. She looked smaller. "Why did you do it?" she asked me, her voice devoid of its usual bite. "Why did you ruin everything?" "I didn't ruin anything, Sophia," I said quietly, sitting across from her through the plexiglass. "I saved what mattered, the people, the legacy." "Mom and Dad, do they hate me?" she asked, a tear sliding down her cheek. "They're confused," I said honestly. "They're realizing that the world they built for you wasn't real. It's hard for them." "And you," she asked, looking up at me, "do you hate me?" I looked at her, my sister, the girl I had once protected from nightmares, the woman who had stolen my birthright. "No," I said. "I don't hate you, I pity you. You had everything, Sophia, and you threw it away because you thought you deserved more without earning it." I stood up to leave. "Emery," she called out. I paused. "Thank you," she whispered. "For the pension, for Mr. Henderson." I didn't turn back. I walked out of the prison and into the bright sunlight. That evening, I drove to a small park overlooking the city. I sat on a bench and watched the lights of the factory flickering in the distance. It was humming with life again. It was solvent. It was safe. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Andrew. "Your mother and I were starting a garden on the balcony. It's small, but it's something. Maybe you could come see it sometime." I stared at the screen. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an admission of guilt, but it was a start. A tiny, fragile olive branch growing out of the scorched earth. I didn't reply immediately. I put the phone down and took a deep breath of the cool night air. I had my own life to return to, my own company, my own future. But for the first time in years, the weight on my chest was gone. I had faced the monsters of my past, and I hadn't just survived. I had won. And in winning, I had given them a chance to be something better, too. I picked up the phone and typed a single word. Maybe. Then I got in my car and drove away, leaving the past in the rearview mirror where it belonged.